Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What Makes Great Transformational Leadership, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Rick Lepsinger. My name is Sarah, and I will moderate today's webinar. The webinar will last about an hour, so if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat area on your GoToWebinar control panel, and then we'll either answer those as they come in throughout the session, at the end if we have time for a live Q&A, or afterwards after the session by email. Today's webinar content is from our reproducible training library. The title is Transformational Leadership. So if you're interested in delivering this training within your organization, please contact HRDQ. Our presenter today is Rick Lepsinger, President of OnPoint Consulting. Rick's career has focused on helping organizations and leaders identify and develop leaders, work better virtually, enhance cross-functional team performance, and get from strategy to execution faster. He conducts numerous seminars and workshops on succession management, leading from a distance, leading cross-functional teams, and enhancing execution. Rick has written numerous articles and is the author or co-author of several books, including his most recent, Closing the Execution Gap, How Great Leaders and Their Companies Get Results. Welcome, Rick, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, Sarah. Thanks very much. It's good to be here, and everyone, thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about transformational leadership, and we'll start by defining what we mean by transformational leadership. We'll talk about the components of transformational leadership. And the good news here is that transformational leadership is within the reach of all of us. I mean, I know kind of conventional wisdom is you look at transformational leaders as a cut above, as the most senior people, as having certain amount of charisma and magnetism. But in fact, all of us have the potential to be transformational leaders. And we'll talk about some particular skills, guidelines that you can use right away to be able to become a transformational leader yourself. So what is transformational leadership just in general? The key here is that this whole notion of transformation is really focused sort of forward-looking. It's all about creating positive change. And that's one of the reasons why this whole idea of transformational leadership as opposed to transactional leadership is getting so much visibility, because the world really is all about change, lack of consistency, needing to drive things forward. And transformational leaders are all about taking that forward look, and it's all about inspiring, motivating others to focus on the greater good and to perform at a level greater than they might think possible. So let's take a look in comparison to transactional leadership. And again, these two types of leadership are sort of counterbalancing each other. Transactional leadership really focuses on the day-to-day. It's more operational, short-term goals, measure performance against standards, structure, directing employees, making decisions quickly, moving forward, and trying to motivate people based on self-interest, right? Now, again, in the literature, sometimes this transactional leadership has a slightly negative tone to it, because people are saying we need to be more transformational, we need to be focusing on change. And I agree that transformational leadership is important, but that's not to imply that transactional leadership does not have a very important role to play. As a matter of fact, in an ideal world, each of us would be able to live in both worlds and be able to focus on the transactional elements of the job when necessary and the transformational elements of the job when required. So on the other hand, the transformational leadership side takes a broader view. It's really about building organizational culture or team culture, focusing on trust, mutual respect, open communication, transparency, building a sense of commitment and accountability toward broader organizational goals, right? And it's trying to take the organization further forward. So Transactional leadership is really about the day-to-day, kind of keeping the lights on, achieving the objectives near term. And transformational leadership is looking forward, saying, what can we be? And again, as I talk about both of them, I think it's easy to see that they are both two sides of the same coin, and they're both critical components of effective leadership. But let's focus on transformational leadership for today. And there are four key components, and we'll talk about what you can do to build and create all four of these. Your calling is really your vision, right? It's all about what you see going forward and the change you'd like to realize. Charisma is really about connecting with people. So don't be put off by the word charisma, because again, in this model, we're looking for 4 C's, right? So instead of vision, we say calling, right? And then we have charisma. But here, this is about connecting with people, right? And building relationships. The challenge is about driving critical thinking, innovation through the organization to achieve positive change. And the fourth is around caring, which is about, again, connecting with people, showing concern, celebrating accomplishments, and focusing on their individual development. Let's start with the calling, and we'll talk about finding, discovering your calling, and sharing or communicating your calling to others, because it starts with some vision of the future. It starts with a picture of what could be rather than what is right now. So when you take a look at some of the examples, you see that they're fairly high-minded. We're talking about Nelson Mandela, Susan B. Anthony, Jeff Bezos, Salam Khan. We're talking about, really high-level pictures of the future, people who wanted to change the world. And you got Steve Jobs in there and that type of thing. However, the calling does not have to be as grand as that. It really is a picture of the future. So it could be as straightforward or as simple as reducing the use of paper in the office, going paperless, and increasing the efficiency of work processes, or maybe even making faster decisions, right? It could be as simple, as concrete as that. Now, of course, if you have the broader vision, that's great, and it is helpful to take a real leap going forward, but you shouldn't feel constrained and limited by, gee, my vision isn't grand enough. It really just has to be a meaningful, significant change for the team or for the organization. So what can you do to connect with and identify your calling? And a lot of this has to do with just reflecting. Just take time to think about what captures your attention, what's important to you, right? What gets in your way? What are some of the issues that both energize you or that you're dealing with? What could be better? You might also check in with other people. Again, we may not be quite as self-aware or in touch of what really gets us engaged and excited and motivated, but others may be able to help us get a clearer picture of what's important to us and what we would like to focus on. Also, it's helpful to basically trust your intuition. You're not doing this to impress other people. This is really about what matters to you, what's important to you. And if you can be genuine and authentic about a change that's important to you, as big or as small as that might be, that's a great starting point, right? But don't be afraid to take something on that is difficult and challenging, right? So again, it's not the scope of the change necessarily, but others might say, well, we just can't do that. Going paperless is ridiculous. Who could do that overall? Try not to be deterred by that. Usually any great new idea is going to come up with resistance or people saying that they can't, but really focus on, that vision and what it'll take to make that happen. Once you're clear about what your vision is, then you need to start to, Right. These are some questions that can help you identify and get clear about what your calling, what your vision might be, right? thinking about various elements of the organization, thinking about what needs to change, thinking about what's working or not working in the workplace, thinking about how things get done, and looking for ways to improve that overall. Once you're clearer about what your vision is or the future state you'd like to achieve, now it's time to be able to enlist and engage other people in that vision. And it really starts with sort of building a coalition and engaging people in that. And again, it starts with clarifying, painting a vivid picture of what that future state would look like. Be clear about both the what and the how. People like to know a little bit about how you're going to do things, but they would also like to know a little bit about what's in it for them. What are some of the key benefits of carrying out this change overall? So this picture is a clarity on that future state and a little bit about the what and how in terms of achieving it and the benefits of that outcome. Related to this, it's about, again, gaining people's buy-in, enlisting them in the vision, and here, involving people in shaping and carrying out the calling is a critical component. You can build ownership by involving others and having them add to it, having them shape it. So in many ways, you're going to ask for feedback, and it's important to be able to not be so attached to your particular vision or the way in which you think you need to achieve it, not to be open to input and suggestions from others, right? You want to try to stay true to the outcome, but maybe be open to the method, to the implementation side of things, right? And talk about tasks, specific activities, ways in which you will achieve this outcome, and be able to hand some of these off to others. So again, it's not just enlisting them intellectually, but you also want to engage them actively, physically, in doing some of the work going forward. One thing you can count on is that you can expect to get resistance, but again, not to let that deter you, because again, most new ideas, you can expect people to prefer to stay the way they are, especially if they're not clear about the benefits. But hang in, stay with it, focus on describing what that future point may be, what some of those problems and shortcomings are in the current situation, and what are some of the things that might make people feel defensive, so you can address those. It's also helpful to be willing to compromise. So you want to stay firm or clear or maintain your conviction on the outcome, but you also want to be flexible and responsive on the methodology, on the journey, on the path toward achieving that outcome, because there may be more than one way to get where you want to go, right? And of course, stay focused on the positives and be patient, right? It's going to take a little bit of time, but people may need to hear the same message several times before they really understand and are ready to adopt it. Let's take a moment to test your knowledge, and we'll have a few of these during the course of the session today, so it's not just me talking at you, but which of these is the least effective when you're trying to enlist support for your calling? And Sarah, if you want to open up the polling question and people can select the one they think is least effective. So we'll leave that open for a little bit till we get about 75% of the people. And Sarah, you can close at any time we get like more than half or close to 75. Okay, let's see the results. And here we come. So almost half of you picked the first one, remaining firm on the outcomes of the strategy, but being flexible on the methodology. And that is absolutely correct. That is the most effective. That is, sorry, that's the least effective is remaining firm on the outcome and the way you're going to achieve it. All the others, repeating the message, identifying tasks you can hand off, and acting as if you've already achieved the vision, are all things you should be doing. It's A is the one that's least effective. Thank you. Let's take a look at the slides. Okay. Let's move to the next, which is charisma. And as I said before, don't let the term charisma put you off. Charisma is really simply about exhibiting self-confidence, displaying warmth, and using storytelling to deliver your message. And all of us are capable of demonstrating some degree of charisma. With some people, it comes more naturally than with others, but all of us are capable of demonstrating this behavior. So again, we tend to think of charisma as an innate quality, but it really isn't. It really is learned behaviors. But then once again, there are some people who are just naturally charismatic, but what they're doing are demonstrating the behaviors that I'm going to talk to you about. So for them, it might come naturally. For others, it may be more of a learned skill. And this is all about making an impression by believing in yourselves and believing in others, by leading by example, and exhibiting self-confidence, displaying warmth, and using stories to deliver your message rather than just laying out facts and data overall. So when we talk about a strong presence, it's both tangible and intangible. On the tangible side, it's sort of the way people perceive you in terms of standing or sitting up straight, expressive gestures, and in some way generating or radiating high energy. Now here it says speaking and moving quickly, but again, it's really with more confidence, right? It's not necessarily fast, but it is with confidence and conviction overall. The intangibles have to do with positive emotions, being enthusiastic, being optimistic. And by the way, when they do assessments of senior leaders and they take a look at the characteristics that differentiate effective senior leaders, it tends to be things like enthusiasm and optimism that really do differentiate the best from those who are good at what they do. The key here is being authentic, being genuine, and figuring out how to display this positive presence in a way that's comfortable for you, but one that's also true to who you are, right? So part of it starts with valuing yourself, right? It's understanding your self-worth, what it is you bring to the party in terms of your talent, your intellect, your capabilities. And it also comes from clarity around core values, right? And being conviction, standing up for them, maybe things like respect or loyalty, integrity, humility, whatever that might be, fairness, team spirit, but it's conviction, clarity on values, and using them to guide your behavior day to day, even if they're somewhat unspoken. The other component here is valuing others. This is about demonstrating trust and respect for others. It's about celebrating the success and accomplishments of others. People with less self-confidence tend to be withholding of information and not necessarily willing to share successes and acknowledge people's contributions. But the higher the self-confidence, the more willing you are to acknowledge the contribution of others. So displaying warmth, and here again, this is doing it in an authentic way, but it's being approachable. It's making eye contact, introducing yourself, having a general smile, not like a weird smile, but a general smile on your face as you're greeting, as if you're actually interested in engaging or talking to that person. Taking steps to put the other person at ease by engaging them in a conversation, encouraging them, asking them questions, making small talk. It's really about building rapport. Building rapport is really an amazing competency in terms of being able to engage others, whether you're going to provide somebody with feedback and coaching or whether you're trying to motivate and inspire. It's one of the ways that you can connect with people overall. And of course, expressing support and appreciation, giving people recognition is always a way to focus on the other person. Listening is a key component, and here it's really balancing the amount of talking that you do. And the key here, when it's about stop talking, it's really about stop talking about you and stop talking about your idea, because good listening definitely involves some conversation, the active listening side of it. So part of it is not interrupting people, let them finish what they have to say. The other part is really listening to the complete message, not just the content of what they say, but also the emotional component of what they say, making sure their words and their body language actually match up, and looking at the nonverbal communication, and of course, engaging in that two-way dialogue in responding appropriately, but not just jumping in and saying what you think, taking time to restate your understanding of what the other person said before you reply, maybe even asking questions to probe a little bit to get a better, more complete understanding. And of course, your body language. We talked about the smile. We talked about leaning in a little bit. The key here for me around body language is multitasking, right? Don't look at your computer, don't look at your phone while you're talking to other people. No matter what else you're doing, you can have the biggest grin on your face and do all kinds of active listening. But if you're looking at your phone, it sort of negates that display of interest, that intent to connect overall, right? So you want to make sure that your body language is appropriate and demonstrates attentiveness and listening, right? That you're the proper distance, not too close, not too far away, right? And that you're using open gestures and inviting people to engage with you. The last component here is around being a compelling storyteller. And one of the things we know is that people tend to remember stories more than they remember facts and data and just straight up information. So if you can figure out how to embed your data or your features or benefits into a story, generally speaking, that will linger and stay with people much more than just a straight up recounting of the data overall, right? So your story should really focus on the point that relates to the change that you're searching for overall, and you're trying to put it in a more emotional context. And of course, it should have a beginning, a middle, and an end overall. One way to think about your story is to treat it literally like a story. Think about the main character, and which could be the organization, right? Could be the customer, could be the client, could be the patient, whatever you're looking at there. You might want to create a little bit of tension in that story by presenting a problem, not necessarily solving it for them right then, but a little bit of tension and intrigue, having a little bit of a twist there, some unexpected event or something that's a little bit surprising can also maintain high levels of attention and retention overall. The use of humor or emotion in your stories helps the information stick a little bit and pulls people into the story. And then the end of the story should have a main point or a conclusion, but not necessarily telling people what to do, but give them some overall lesson that they can then imply or figure out what they should do overall. There's a gentleman named Peter Guber who happens to be a movie producer, so he knows something about storytelling. He's written an HBR article that's been around for a number of years now called The Four Truths of the Storyteller, which puts another kind of perspective on what it takes to tell stories. And the first truth is truth to the teller. It's about being honest and authentic. And that's one of the themes in general about being a transformational leader: authenticity and being true to yourself. You're not putting on a persona. So this story that you're telling is one that has meaning for you and reflects your values, and one in which you're able to, in a authentic way, share your emotions related to this vision and or this outcome. The truth to the audience. And this is about understanding the audience in terms of what they know, what they care about, what's important to them, and then crafting the story that resonates and meets those needs overall, right? So you're satisfying two elements. There's a certain factual side to the story, but you're also satisfying an emotional component. The third is truth to the moment. You want to tailor the story to the situation. Try not to tell the exact same story the exact same way in every situation, but you want to make sure that you're prepared, but you also want to be ready to drop the script and improvise based on the situation or the audience, but still keeping that direction in mind and relating the story to that outcome and that moment and that audience. And the last is about truth to the mission, the overall value proposition, one that's actually worthy of this audience. You want to make sure that your story resonates with meaning, with passion overall. And that doesn't mean that you have to be hyper energetic necessarily, but it's the way in which you tell the story. It's how you connect the values of your story with the values of the audience, with the mission overall, right? And express your values, and it's really a call to action where you're asking others to adopt and embrace your values, your direction, the calling that you envision. So let's test your knowledge here. And which of the following behaviors increase charisma? Which of these increase charisma? So take a look and identify the ones that increase charisma. All right, and Sarah, when we get to about 50, we can close it down. Okay, and 85% of you picked D, and in fact, that is the correct answer. It's about turn your attention to others and listen to them is one of the basic and key components of demonstrating charismatic behavior. All right, nice job. Let's take a look at the slides. And let's take a look at the next area, which is the challenge. But here it's about encouraging people to be critical thinkers and to stimulate creativity and innovation. And this is all in the service of achieving the vision or the calling overall, right? So you want to encourage people to be critical thinkers. You don't want them to take things as they come, but to question assumptions, assess the quality and the value of information, to reframe problems, and to do potential problem analysis to identify unintended consequences. And when it comes to stimulating creativity and innovation related to critical thinking, you want them to challenge or question the status quo and to think of ways to improve current processes overall, encourage innovation. And this could be as simple as work process improvement or continuous improvement. It doesn't have to be reinventing how work goes. It could be a nice, straightforward continuous improvement piece as well. One of the things you need to do around critical thinking is to avoid common biases, because it's these biases that impede our judgment and negatively impact our ability to make high quality decisions. And there are four common biases. One is the bias of availability, where we tend to choose solutions that we are most familiar with because they're comfortable and recognizable. Generalizations is where we draw a conclusion based on a small number of cases or a very specific case overall. So if this person said it, everybody must feel that way, which may not necessarily be the case. Anchoring is your initial assumption or the initial data you collect tends to shape your subsequent reasoning. So whatever you think in the beginning sort of colors how you look at it going forward. Confirmation bias is only looking for evidence that supports your inclination or your intuition. So confirmation bias, you're starting with a conclusion and then looking for data that supports it. In hasty generalization, you're starting with a small sample of data and generalizing to a broader population. And the last bias is escalation of commitment, which is continuing to invest or pursue a course of action, even though you're getting information that it may in fact be failing. So let's give you guys a chance to see if you can identify which bias is being illustrated here. So this first one is all customers I spoke with are happy with our service. We don't need to make any changes. So let's put a polling question up there and see which bias is being illustrated here. And let's take a look as soon as we get over 50. Okay, let's see what we have. Okay, here it is. So people have hasty generalizations, and in fact, that is correct. Here you're taking a small sample overall, and you're basically generalizing to a broader outcome. All right. Okay, nicely done. Let's take a look at the next one. And here we have, hold on, it's a little slow. All right, so the next is individual investors more likely to buy stocks of a company that's often covered by the media as opposed to stocks of a lesser known company. Which bias is being illustrated here? Let's see that polling question. Okay, what do we got? Okay, and 41%, most of you picked availability, and that is in fact the correct response. Let's take a look at the screen. Availability, it's familiar, it's recognizable, right? We know what's going on there, so we tend to choose it overall, right? Let's take a look at the third one. An employer who believes that a job applicant is highly intelligent focuses on information that's consistent with that belief. Let's see the polling question. And which bias is that? Okay. How are people doing? Let's see what we got. And here, yeah, many of you picked confirmation bias, and it's good. You're getting better. Nobody's picking availability, or that's a confirmation bias, right? And the key here is to be able to recognize biases, by the way. And we'll do the fourth one. Hold on. The fourth, this is Motorola released the Iridium phone. You might remember this in 1998. After 15 years of R&D, the phone cost $3,000. It was literally the size of a brick. The company continued to invest in the product even when the market conditions changed dramatically and the product lost its competitive edge. Which bias does this illustrate? And by the way, this is where they were shooting satellites into the air. They must have shot like 30, 50 satellites into the air. That was the mechanism for transmitting the calls. So, but again, the technology changed pretty rapidly. Okay, let's see what we got there. Yes, and 82% picked escalation of commitment. That's absolutely right. It is escalation of commitment. In fact, And again, it's the hesitancy to say maybe I was wrong, or the inclination to say, well, if I do a little bit more time, a little bit more money, maybe it will be okay, right? And let's take a look at the last one. Mock jurors tend to vote to acquit a defendant when they're shown information about the innocence of the defendant before they say information about his or her guilt. So which bias is being illustrated here? If you're tracking it, there's one left. All right, what do we got there? And anchoring, yes, 65. This is around anchoring. If it was hasty generalizations, it'd be going from just a small sample of data. If it was confirmation, it would be kind of just looking for data to support your previously held conviction. This is about kind of being anchored to just color your rest of your view of the issue overall. The key here around biases is not so much that you can change or eliminate your biases. The key is to be aware of your biases and understand when they are a problem. Because sometimes biases help you sort through information and they can be helpful, but sometimes they can be a problem. One key thing is to just question assumptions, right? Ask questions, ask a lot of why questions. And here you see an example that's called questioning to the void. Keep asking why questions until you can really get down to the root cause or the key foundational assumption overall. You also want to make sure that you're differentiating between facts and opinions. Assumptions that are based on opinions can be a problem. Now, again, in today's world, we're even not sure what facts are anymore, but generally one would believe that facts are something that can be confirmed and validated and proven, and opinions are just more my point of view, not necessarily based on any real information or data overall. Be careful of absolutes, always, never, everyone, because that really, it's unlikely that anything is always, never, or everyone. And get input from third parties, outsiders. They have a different or fresh point of view overall. You also want to assess the value and importance of the information overall, the value and the quality of the information. And a couple of key questions you can use are related to ask what the source is. Where did it come from and how dependable is that source? Is the information very specific or is it vague? Is it based on a broader and narrow perspective? And is anything being omitted? That era of omission can make data look very, very different just by leaving out a couple of key components. So you want to make sure that you're questioning the validity and the quality and the usefulness of the information. It also helps to reframe issues overall. It kind of gives a different perspective on the problem, helps you look at it a little bit differently, and opens up your thinking to approach it in a different way. And it helps overcome biases because you're now thinking about it and looking at it through a different lens, right? It's also helpful to do a potential problem analysis when you're looking at choices and options, because when you're making decisions, it's not just about the positive aspects of your choice, but every choice also has a downside. So you want to make sure that you're surfacing unintended consequences or potential problems. And a couple of key questions is really just, what could go wrong here, right? What would happen if, what could happen that we don't want to happen? What can we do to minimize the chances of those things happening, right? So you're trying to think about what could go wrong here, what's the probability of that event occurring, and what might you be able to do to address it should it occur. When it comes to creating, stimulating creativity and innovation, it's all about encouraging people to take risks and to be bold in looking at the status quo. So you want them to question the status quo overall, not to accept things as they currently are. And once again, this for me is as much modest, continuous improvement, small changes. All these things don't have to be big, enormous, transformational, rethink our business model. It can be just look at the work processes and how can we improve them overall. It's helpful to have someone who is a devil's advocate who's just asking what if. We tend to dissuade people from taking that role because it slows the process down and we interpret it as not being a team player, but it really can help us look at things in a different light overall. So you want people, it's not so much, hey, if nothing's wrong, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But you really do want to encourage people to look at different ways to improve things overall, giving people permission to break rules or to take some risks overall. The key on risk taking is, again, because you're going to say take a prudent risk, but it's hard to calibrate that. But when people take a risk, and if it does not turn out as you would like, use it as a learning opportunity, right? Rather than consequences or punishment, use it as a learning opportunity to help people assess risk and to be able to determine when appropriate risk taking is necessary overall. You also want to encourage innovation, where you're empowering people to make decisions, to take actions independently, to not wait for permission to do things overall. You might create a database or a website that has ideas or lessons learned that people can access. You might have something like a challenge of the month to get people focused on a particular issue. Things like action learning are nice ways to get people focused on a problem that's a real business issue and focusing on coming up with a real solution. Other games, other activities can also create innovative environment overall. Holding meetings in unusual places, encouraging cross-training, mixing it up socially. All these things are getting people to see the world differently, to get out of their comfort zones, and to think a bit differently in general. So let's test your knowledge in this area overall. Which of the following is true of the process of critical thinking? All right, so let's see that. Okay, which is true? All right, let's see those results. Yes, you guys are very good, and it is B. The accuracy of your conclusions depends on the quality of your information. That is absolutely correct. All right. So let's take a look at the last, and this is around caring. And here, this is about just making personal connections, demonstrating empathy, and encouraging professional development. It's focusing on the other person overall. So what it takes around demonstrating caring, it's about the personal connection, empathy, and professional development overall. And it's fairly straightforward. All these things are clearly within your control. Matter of fact, all the things we've been talking about are within your control. So making personal connections is taking time to get to know people, right? And if you're in a virtual world, geographically distributed, you need to make a little bit more effort to connect with people overall, but taking time to get to know people, finding out about their interests, spending time with others, trying not to isolate yourself is one way to connect. And demonstration of empathy. And there seem to be three types of empathy. And this is also related to emotional intelligence, but there's cognitive empathy, which is being able to stand in the shoes of someone else and see the world through their eyes. Emotional empathy is picking up on their nonverbal cues and being able to read the emotional aspect of their message and their behavior. And then the compassionate empathy is actually doing something about it, taking that information and demonstrating understanding and support. And a lot of this is around self-awareness, being in touch with yourself. If you're aware of your own behavior, your own preferences, and how your behavior impacts others, it makes it easier to connect with other people in a constructive way. And one of the tools of that is mindfulness, right? Where you're being a bit more introspective, really trying to get a better understanding of your preferences, your style, your skill, your behavior, and how it plays out in your interactions with others. Developing others is a key component here. And again, this, especially if you're a manager, is you have a lot of opportunities here around encouraging people to take training, on the job developmental opportunities, ongoing education for classes outside of work overall, volunteer activities, networking activities, all of these, and they can be formal and informal networking overall, joining professional organizations, mentoring, coaching, you being a model as a continuous learner yourself in general. All right, and then of course, having a formal individual development plan where it's not just sort of random developmental activities, but where you've sat down with the person, identified a couple of areas that they'd like to enhance or develop further, and then be able to set specific goals and specific activities that would then achieve those goals, and then periodically meeting to measure progress and accomplishments and provide guidance, coaching, mentoring, and counseling. Let's test your knowledge here. And this is the ability to see the world through someone else's eyes, is the definition of which type of empathy. Psychological, emotional, cognitive, or compassionate. And before I took this program, I didn't even know that there were 3 kinds of empathy. So let's take a look and see what we have. Right, and most of you pick cognitive empathy, and that's exactly right. It's the seeing the world through someone else's eyes overall. Okay, let me just. All right, so let's just take a moment and have you guys go. I don't know if there's a chat box. Let's have you go to the chat box, and I'd be interested, before we open it up for questions, I'd be interested in general about what will you do differently based on what we talked about today. Just a quick take, realizing you might need time to really think about it, but a quick take. What will you do differently to enhance your effectiveness as a transformational leader? And let's kind of do that in the chat box, if you will, and then we'll take some time for questions as well. And Sarah, I may not be able to see them, so you may have to.
Yep, I was just going to ask if you could see those. So it's in the questions area for you, Rick, but I can see some themes are coming up here. We have a lot of people are saying listening, listening more, better listener. And then a couple are saying things around mindfulness, being present, focus on another person. We have some interest in the storytelling that you talked about, and stimulating critical thinking is coming up. And then I would say the last theme I'm seeing here in all these responses is the emotional intelligence, and that's coming out as well as a lot of people are commenting on that.
Right, and I think the thing that's important about the things that you're listing there, folks, is that all those things are within your power, you're capable. Those are behaviors that you can control. Those are things that you can make happen. So this journey to being a transformational leader is within, all of us can actually make that happen. It's not really just reserved for some super beings. These are things that we can, in fact, do. They're behaviors that we can actually learn overall. Okay, so Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Yep. We've got we do have time for some questions, so go ahead and send those questions in. And while we're waiting for the questions to come in, I just want to share with you a little bit about about HRDQ, and then Rick, you can actually cover those best practices if you want to, and we start that Q&A.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
You can
So
chime in
just
on
some of
those.
the best practices we've been talking about. It starts with getting clear about your vision. What is it that drives your passion and your energy? And that's really what we mean by it overall. And then to be able to engage and enlist people in that vision and help them make it its own. Self-confidence. And self-confidence can come if you believe in what you're saying in terms of where the organization needs to be or what the improvement might be or what the change might be. It's easier to be confident about it overall. Demonstrate an interest in others, because again, even if it's self-serving, you need other people to achieve that vision and that calling. But a genuine interest in others can contribute to engaging and enlisting them. Talked about stories. Stories are a great way to get information and ideas across. People tend to remember them more than just the data on its own. You want to encourage people to demonstrate curiosity, to demonstrate creativity related to achieving positive change. It's critical thinking. It's innovative ideas overall. It's all about inspiring and motivating others, and that's where the connecting with people goes a long way. The extent to which you're in touch with not just your feelings, but your behavior and how it plays out and impacts others. This notion of emotional intelligence is a key component of transformational leadership. And of course, the whole idea of continuous learning, continuous growth is what transformational leadership is about, that continuous change, continuous development going forward. All right. Okay, Sarah, so over to you.
Great. So we have an interesting comment that came in that I thought the audience also might relate to. But Tricia here says that she's not a manager, but she is a teacher, and this information is perfect to use in a classroom, especially to listen and to be mindful. And so she appreciates those those recommendations. Yeah, good. So our first question here. Coming in is around the calling you were just sort of speaking about. What if I don't have an exciting calling? How do I engage others in a more routine kind of vision?
Yeah, and that's the key. The key here is, and just to emphasize, it doesn't have to be a big deal, glow in the dark kind of a vision. It can be a very basic, fundamental kind of change that you're moving. I think the key here is this notion of benefits, help people understand what's in it for them personally, as well as how this would benefit the team or the company or the organization overall, and involving people, getting their input, and making them part of the implementation. So it's not just, hey, let's do it to you, but getting them engaged in an active physical way, not just a mental way, I think can really bridge the gap. Also, if it's important, it can be important and be small. It doesn't have to be big to be important. So, getting people engaged in smaller things that are really important can be very powerful as well.
Good. We have some questions around empathy. This one kind of summarizes it nicely. How can you become more empathetic if it's just not in your natural tendency?
Right. Okay. Well, this is so some of us are naturally empathetic. I mean, that's true. Some of us just really are able to relate, connect, identify, and are sympathetic, empathetic, and really want to listen to other people. I mean, and it comes naturally to them. For others of us, not so much. So the key here is to understand that people are necessary to implement the change. Once you get that people are necessary and that you can't do it by yourself, then the idea is, what do I need to do to engage people overall? So in the beginning, taking time, we say to you, it's helpful to listen. So in the beginning, you're going to listen because I told you to. You're going to listen because somebody said that's a good thing to do. But over time, you'll actually discover that listening is really helpful. Not only do you learn a lot of stuff, but the other person feels heard and more engaged. So being able to connect with people starts to come more naturally once you appreciate the importance of it overall. So in the beginning, it might just be a behavior that you're demonstrating because you're trying to achieve an outcome. But over time, you start to really see the value overall, and your more than just the behavior changes, your point of view changes, and it becomes a little bit more natural. Just for what it's worth, those of you who are married or have significant others, you need to learn empathy really quickly in, in that kind of interaction if that is going to succeed. And if you care enough about the situation and the relationship, you'll learn empathy because you see the impact and the importance of it. And it's the same at work. If it's important enough, you'll start to do it because you realize how critical and important it is. And after a while, it becomes the way you interact and engage because it's more natural to how you do that with folks. So.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. And I'm seeing a theme here in a couple questions that have just come through, and it's around time. It's around busyness and time. The concept of asking employees to do more with less. We have some people who have commented that a lot of their jobs are really transactional in nature, and so that engagement, kind of an exciting calling, I think, within a bigger vision. There's some questions in there on how do you juggle that with that day-to-day transactional nature of a job, or people are already feeling either that they are overworked or they are already limited in time in their day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the problem with what we've come to associate with transformational leadership. All the literature talks about, like Gandhi and Steve Jobs stuff as transformational leaders. And it makes it sound like all these things are enormous undertakings that are about, rethinking the business model and, transforming how work gets done. And that certainly is true to some degree. But when we talk about transformational leadership as a companion to transactional leadership overall, because they really are two sides of the same coin, to me, it's more about continuous process improvement, right? So even in a transactional job or transactional work, there is something that could be done better, something that could be improved overall. And you want people focused on that, right? So maybe it's easier to just do it the way we already did it, but maybe if we invested, a little bit of time, will actually save time downstream a little bit. So you need to help people both understand the benefit of taking time now and how it'll play out later on. But the other thing is pick something that is important and has meaning, even if it's small. And I was saying this before overall. If I want to engage you, I need to pick something, or my vision, this calling, needs to have meaning for you. It can't just be something that's in my head, like a burr under my saddle or something I want to do differently. I need to make sure that you understand why it's important, how it'll add value, and how it will benefit you. So and the other thing is pick something that's related to the work. So if we're more transactional, pick something that's parallel with the transactional work, not extra, right? Pick something that's related to what I do day to day that'll make what I do day to day important, and it's about what I do day to day. That, I think, is one way to get at it and not see transformational leadership as something giant and big and shiny that's outside of what we do day to day.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rick. As always, just great hearing your insight into these, real world problems.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
So if we did not get to answer your question, we will respond by email. So go ahead and feel free to send those on. I do just want to let you know about HRDQ. We publish research-based experiential learning products that you can deliver in your organization. So check out our online or print self-assessments. We have up out of your seat games, and then reproducible workshops like today's presentation was based on the Transformational Leadership title. And so you can check those out, give our customer service team a call to ask any questions you might have. And if you need help learning a training program or you want one of our expert trainers to deliver it for you, like Rick, we also provide those services. So we look forward to being your soft skills training resource. And thank you for participating in today's webinar, and happy training.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.